Hello and welcome to the second show previewing the Australian Muscle Car Masters. I've got two greats here with us, Luke West and Todd Martin. Todd, thanks for joining us at very late notice here, an extra special guest to have on the stream, but we're going to start with Luke. Luke, you're the editor of the fine publication Australian Muscle Car Masters. You've been that for a long time. You're involved with the Muscle Car Masters as well as a commentator and host. Thanks for coming. I guess, what's your history? What got you into being involved with motorsport and automotive?
Thank you, Daniel. Great to be here and great to try something new with what you're doing. Big fan. Well, how did I get into motorsport? Well, I love cars from day one, like so many of us did, and it was a case of saw my first motor race meeting at Amaroo Park when I was 10 in 1979, and Allan Moffat's Federation Falcon. Because my eldest brother took me out to that. We didn't come from a car family. I was the black sheep, or I am still the black sheep of the family, and the only one that's really into motorsport and cars, and you're born with it, aren't you? So, and then it's just attending the Sydney races and attending Bathurst, and that's how it all happened, and reading the mags.
I think that's a really interesting actual point to put into this. Is a lot of people, for what we talk about, it's passed down generation to generation, that real motorsport blood, but you've really found your own way to it and come into it and developed your own love, I guess, admittedly from what I read about your father's Falcons, but what was it like to sort of try to push your own way into motorsport without having people willing to take you so much?
Well, my parents and my siblings thought I was a freak because I'd be buying every motorsport magazine under the sun, Auto Action and Racing Car News and Checkered Flag. Did my work experience, would you believe it, Checkered Flag magazine.
Yep.
And how I got into the magazine work as a profession is that as an avid reader of Auto Action, I used to write in. And I was working for a bloke at the time called John Smales, who heads a PR company, and he'll be at the Muscle Car Masters this weekend. He's been involved in motorsport and automotive PR forever and a day. And at that stage, the project group, which is the company that John headed, he had the contract for the Bathurst 1000. Meantime, he had one of his worker bees, me, writing in under an alias to Auto Action magazine to the letters section, and I was doing it under an alias because I didn't want to get in trouble from John writing under the name of Luke West. So I wrote, because motorsport was always a religious experience for me, I wrote under the name of the Reverend Limiter, and I would write in one week, and then there'd be characters responding the next week, and I got a bit of a following. It's incredible that a letter writer to a magazine would get a following, and after a year or two of doing that, Alan Edwards, the then editor of Auto Actions back in the year 2000, said, "Hey, love what you're doing, would you like to do a column?" And then everything else I've done in the motorsport publishing game and motorsport generally has stemmed from having that Reverend Limiter column. In the year 2000, I got more and more requests to do stories and work for various people. From that came the invitation to commentate at race meetings. And then I spent about 3 or 4 years following the supercars around the country, or then V8 supercars, and doing the PA commentary for big screen TV, as they called it, the PA commentary. Along the way, started writing for this fine magazine as a freelancer. Started to do the profile pieces on all the old drivers, and my favourite one, of course, is Peter Jansen. And then when Mark Osler decided after 9 years that he wanted to move on from being editor of AMC, put my name forward. That was 2011, and I've been there ever since.
Yeah, and that's a long period within the motorsport community. I know there's also a lot of talk that this magazine is a beloved magazine in the Australian motorsport and general automotive magazine. Todd, you're heavily involved with it as well. What does it mean to you?
It's credibility, and it has been from day one. Certainly, Luke's predecessor, Mark Osler, was known to many on the screen. When Mark got into the fray of publishing and being, I guess, full time, it was the first magazine. There were many others, but the first modern publication that was credible. When this was first brought out, 2001 or 2001. I remember the first cover had 3 iconic cars on it, and for those people watching, you will know edition number 1 is one of the hardest to get. XRGT, HK Monaro, I think, I believe in silver. And what else was there? Was another GT? SLR 5000.
It was actually 6 cars. It was 3 rows.
That's correct.
2.
Yeah.
And sorry, I used the old microphone there. But don't want to steal your thunder here, but since you're talking about that, the latest issue goes on sale tomorrow. That's issue number 98. So we're heading towards issue number 100. And what are we going to do? Well, let's just say it's going to be, well, I'll come out and say it. We're going to replicate in some form cover number 1 for issue number 100. And we're going to do it here where we are filming this at Sydney Motorsport Park.
That's going to be awesome.
It is a good thing. It gives credibility to many people. And it covers so many different facets. Obviously of road cars, which are obviously the derivative, but the race cars. It's covered off on a lot of, I call it barbecue talk. It's where a guy stands around a barbecue and talks to a mate about a mate he knew that had a wife who had a cat, and its owner knew another guy had a cat or that knew a dog that was told a pork pie in 1988 or 1968. So it is a definitive knowledge-based publication.
Yep.
It continues to prosper, and obviously with this new edition that's out, tomorrow, it gives its credibility, from all facets, and that's why for me, we go back to the early days of the Muscle Car Masters, 2005. The magazine had to be involved. Because back then it was the credible witness to what people have been talking about for years. So it's a good thing. And it's something that certainly the event over the years, and even before that, I did an event in 2004, the Tirana Nationals at Norwell, and Australian Muscle Car Magazine Tirana Nationals. And we did some great photo shoots of having all the Holden Dealer Team Tiranas, the XU1s and the A9Xs there from the Bowden collection. So it's a great thing, and I do look forward to issue number 100 because I certainly would understand that there'll be a lot of, I won't say retro or reminiscing, but it will provide people with a great history into the publication. So it's going to be a great thing.
It's going to be brilliant, and to be able to see it get that far as well. And I think something about it to think about is that Muscle Car Masters as the event is going back to a lot more the heritage of this magazine that it all started from, which is a brilliant thing to see and be involved with from your point.
I can rattle off a number of covers over the years of the magazine. One of the greatest covers for me was actually the probably first or second edition for Charger, Valiant Charger, on the cover. Great car, great motor car, probably one of the best style and Australian design cars it's ever been. Anyone, it was the first car I think in the world from memory that had a body shape into the rear of it. So wonderful car, but there's been some fantastic things. Overlanders, there's been a collection, the Bill Burke car. Over the years, there's been a myriad of things, and it ties in nicely, obviously, that we just so happen we might actually have the cover car with us this weekend, which, if that can happen, that just really put cream on the cake for the event.
To talk about the history as well, something we're running during this stream on the Sydney Motorsport Park Facebook page, so make sure you're over there watching, is to share with us your favourite memory from the 10 years so far. This is number 11 of Muscle Car Masters. So if you get your comment in, Todd and Luke vote on the one that you guys like the best, and the memory that they like the best, you'll be getting a free ticket to the Sunday of the event, which is going to be big. So we'll keep an eye out on that on the stream for comments. Leave us your best memory. And also, if you've got a question for Luke or Todd, make sure to write it in, because this is interactive. It's meant to be about the community, which is what this magazine and the event is all about. So if you've got a question, make sure to get it into us. We'll have a chat about it.
I know my favourites. I have two that stick indelibly in the mind, and this gets back to perhaps something happening next year. The 2018 edition of the Masters is a guy that came to the event that had history in motorsport. So did his dad, in round dirt track sort of stuff and speedway. But this guy came to the Masters the first few years when it was the Bianchi touring cars, I think, were floating around. And this guy turned up and absolutely lit it wild. He was actually running Group N, and he had this wonderful yellow car, number 31, and Paul Stubber came to the event.
Brilliant.
And he blew people away. There was another guy as well, but these guys got out front and they would just light the cars up. The brilliance with Paul is that he knew how to drive and control the car. So Paul Stubber's one that sticks in my mind, and I know that we've had some discussions about hopefully getting Paul back.
Yeah.
It'll be great. He can have his own expression session. That's it.
Master blast from Paul Stubber.
Yeah, it'd be a great thing.
That's it. My favourite is also Paul Stubber related. Not only did Paul bring his Camaro, but he also brought his his ex-Holden dealer team A9X Marlboro Tirana out and put a current V8 supercar, then current V8 supercar gun in the form of Jason Richards in the car. Now that first year, as Todd will tell you, he's still getting therapy, Todd, because he put together this massive event in 2005 or into 2006, whatever the first year was, and of course all the planning went into it, and it absolutely poured down that first year. And it kind of just added to the charm, and it was part of the story of the Muscle Car Masters. And part of that story was that in the Heritage Touring Car races, the Group A, Group C races, Jason Richards, behind the wheel, I think it was the ex-John Harvey A9X, absolutely showed his brilliance in the wet. And you could see he was against mostly amateur drivers, the car owners of the Group C and Group A cars, and they understandably doing a much better job than I would do in the wet, but they were struggling.
Yeah.
But to see an absolute current day gun in the wet in an old car streeting the field, it really rammed home how good Jason was. And of course, and gun drivers generally, the supercar drivers, and of course we lost Jason a few years ago, a few years after that. The Group A, Group C races still have a nod to Jason Richards at the Muscle Car Masters to this day.
Which is pretty incredible. I think for me, my memory of that stands out is probably being here, I think it was 2012, 2013, when they used the long extension for one of the first times, and John Bower killing them all in the Mustang, and suddenly Mustang Sally loses the wheel through the back section. He drives it all the way home and into the pit lane, and it's just grinding the bottom out of it. It was
a handicap Sally.
Yeah, it was a big moment because he was leading the championship that year, and there was all sorts going on. So to see that was a pretty big moment. I guess thinking about going forward, what's some of the cool stuff that we can expect this weekend?
Well, certainly this weekend is it's a turning corner for the event.
Yeah.
There's no denying it. For those people that have been to previous muscle car events, the area directly behind the pit garages and the carports has been filled with trailers, tender vehicles and vehicles involved in getting the race cars to the circuit. But this year they're gone. They have a period to bump in. Come Saturday morning, bright and early, there's close to 150 motor cars will be on display through that area. It's going to be a strange thing for many because the carports along the back of the circuit will be empty. And it's a case for us to connect with everyone as a spectator, and particularly Luke and I. And we're all fans at heart, we certainly are, but we're going to have around 25 GDRs and XU1s that have come from around the country celebrating the anniversary of Brock's 72 win. We've got has to be a 1-2-77 Bathurst Falcon celebration, so we've gone that in the design of the V.
Yep.
We are also pleased that the number 2 car that Colin Bond drove in 1977 is coming to the event as well.
Yeah.
We've also got a collection of cars and a great tribute to Bo Seaton.
Yeah.
Bo, of course, grandfather of Aaron, father of Glenn. The 3 Seatons will be here on Saturday, and there is a 23-car tribute to Bo Seaton, Capri's GT500s. I've even got some great people coming from Taree that have replicated his 1966 Cooper S that he drove. Full stick it up, it'll be a great thing. So to have a full parade produced, we stop on the main straight, the front straight here, get out John Smales, as Luke mentioned earlier. Luke, John will be out interviewing Bo. It's something that certainly this event in the past has done tributes to competitors, but this year is pretty special. It's orchestrated, it's worked out, everyone knows their places. It'll be a great thing.
Yeah.
there's a myriad of... I've got oddballs and rarities,
Yeah.
and I want people, if you're online viewing, type in Ford Granada V8 1972-73, see what comes up. I've got a guy coming from Melbourne with this. It's like someone's injected a Cortina with steroids. This thing is like a Piranha V8. It's a beautiful car. Vinyl roof, orange with a cream vinyl roof.
Yep.
Mick's bringing it from Melbourne. It's an oddball car,
Yeah.
and that's the importance of this event, to connect with people. I've spoken to a few people over the last few days and showed them photos of the car, and their car guys and girls, what is that? The first question is, what is it?
Yeah.
So we've got that. We've got some sports sedans on display. We've got Holden dealer team cars on display. We've got a pretty special car coming that hasn't been seen in the flesh for a long time. It's the real number 17 Holden dealer team Commodore that Barry Ferguson drove around Australia in 1979. So Barry is coming to the event with his son Peter. There's the Tirana Transporter.
Yeah.
There's going to be 6
I
red
know
Tiranas.
you had such a hype on that one. That's probably been a standout. I feel like every time we've chatted, Luke, Todd's come out with his Tirana Transporter.
And it's going to be a ripper. And that harks back to Bathurst 73, wasn't it? When Ron Hodgson, the famous Holden dealer, he entered a car, an XU1 for Bob Morris. And so it was a red car, stick it up with Ron Hodgson Holden. Well, they brought out 6 promotional cars, put them on a big transporter, left them in the pits as something would just catch the eye. And that caught the cameras, got lots of historical pics. Well, we're going to replicate that. Now, before Todd's going to just have a think now of some other things that because there's 1,000 things he's organised, and while he gathers his thoughts to give us part 2 on what's going to be here, I want to give you a little bit more of an idea of the backstory to all of this. The man on my left, Todd Martin, was involved in the event for the first couple of years, then had some time away from the event. We brought him back this year because we wanted to get the Muscle Car Masters back to how the event was in its early days, when it absolutely boomed. On the back of the magazine's launch in 2001, the next logical thing was to get some events happening, including our own event. So, as Todd said, this is very much an event turning the corner, but it's going back to where it started. So it's going around 4 corners, basically around that block, the streetscape, to start where it really took off in 2005 with awesome static displays. That's what's going to blow people away this weekend, all thanks to our friend here. Tell us a couple of other things.
Sorry, just to cut back to the stream.
I was trying to take over then.
I'm just people who are asking their questions in that we should have a look at.
No, absolutely.
So we've got Steve Gernon saying yes to bring back Paul Stubber, so obviously that's hit a spot. We've also got one from Joanne Hodge, and she's asking, out of the Australian legends who will be attending this event, who for you guys were the standouts to watch on track back in the day, I guess?
Oh, gee. It's interesting you asked Luke about history, and I grew up in New Zealand, and I've lost the accent, thank heavens. I look back, unfortunately, my mum went to school with Jim Richards. So I have a standing joke with Stephen Richards. I always say to Stephen, I could have been you. And Stephen just goes, no, Todd, you couldn't have been me, son. Richo's obviously a favourite. And over the years, I'm very lucky to deal with a lot of legends, day in, day out. There's certain people that stick out in the mind. KB, Kevin Bartlett, for one. But then, Bob Holden over the years, and Bob's still running a Group A Corolla. So there's a whole host of them. But as a kid growing up, strangely enough, people online or people watching this over in New Zealand, the Cologne Capri in New Zealand and the Cossack Warrior. These are cars of New Zealand race history, which the Stone brothers actually have connections to. But yeah, KB, Bob Holden, there's a dozen of them. I guess for me, it's seeing them in publications, watching them on video, but meeting them and then becoming, unfortunately, red wine drinkers. Not mentioning Kevin Bartlett's name, it gives you a different facet.
Proceeding to.
A facet to things. So for me, there's a whole myriad. I know Luke's got some different variations on that too.
Well, to me, I told you the story about my first ever car race meeting. Allan Moffat was there, so. To have Allan here in the 40th anniversary year of his biggest result is going to be fantastic. There's such an aura around Allan, and he's a bit of a misunderstood character. He's actually quite shy at times, and to actually meet him and have one-on-one time with him and get to know him over the last couple of years, and you see what a terrific, warm fellow he is. You didn't see that during the intensity of racing, but for him to be here this weekend signing his book. I mean, we've been waiting for how many years for his book, and I can tell you that it went to the top of the sporting bestsellers list with Billy Slater, the NRL player from the Storm. His book, they were neck and neck over the last month as to what's been the biggest Australian sporting book of October.
Real nod to history. Moffat's book just edged ahead right at the line, right? It's just got across the...
Yeah, it was like a 1-2 form finish, strangely enough.
Dale Sudotz has actually written in as well.
One of our favourites.
Yeah,
From the Bathurst CEO of the Bathurst Hilton.
He said, what's happening at the 40th anniversary, some of the stuff that people can expect. I think we've touched on some of it with Colin Bond being in attendance. Moffat's going to be here. There's a few things going on, a few things we can't talk about that are going to be happening. So you have to make sure you're either here or watching on the live stream. But if you're here, you'll get the real experience of it. So make sure to buy your tickets, australianmusclecarmasters.com.au. Just a quick plug there to get to the website and buy some. But yeah, what else can we expect?
Certainly, the number 2 car will be here. Colin Bond's car will be here, and let's thank obviously directly to Chris Bowden and the Bowden family. But we've also got the Moff 77, the Moffat 77 car, which is a great collection. I think there's 77 being made from memory, a modern Mustang in the Moffat Ford dealer livery. The number 1, so they've lived up a number 1 car. So to have, it's a bit of a, I won't say a retro word, but it's to have the modern Mustang with the number 1 and the number 2 Bond thing. It's not bad. It's a different variation on that 1-2 that obviously people would have seen online and obviously on television at the recent Bathurst meeting. So, a few things happening with that, and obviously they'll be brought to everyone's attention on Sunday morning, and it's a great gesture from the ARDC, and I'm sure everyone watching will find out more about that as it comes to fruition.
Exactly. There's a lot planned. We're also going to have Tickford here doing some things, which will be really, a good opportunity for people to see those cars in the flesh for what they've done. There's been a lot in magazines and a lot of articles about it, but this chance to really get up close and personal to see what they've done as a tribute to the 77.
And we've got a great collection of, I must say, FPV Tickford Art Club of New South Wales. Ben's been a really pivotal role for that. We've got around 20 Tickford road cars and FPV vehicles coming. They'll be on display basically beside the grandstand on what I call the flat area beside the grandstand. So they're going to be on display. Tickford will be there with merchandise and products to sell as well, and obviously that number 1 car. So that's a pretty cool thing to. I haven't seen it in the flesh. It just looks. The stripes on that Mustang look great.
Did you notice who one of the chaps who bought one of the Tickford Mustangs done up as the Moffat 77 car? Was it a chap by the name of Terry Daly? And I go, oh, what's that name?
Oh, I didn't know the name.
Terry
You
Daly.
tell a story, right?
And when I went, geez, that name's familiar. And I looked up, and he drove a Ford Escort at Bathurst in 77, and if Allan was on the second row of the grid in 77 and Colin on the first row of the grid, well, you know how in those days the field went down pit straight, and with 55 or 60 cars, something like that, turned the corner. Right on the apex of the corner was the car that Terry Daly drove that day. So he would have seen Moffat pass him 20 times or something like that during the day. So how cool is it that one of the other Ford drivers from Bathurst 77 has gone, wow, that was such a great experience to be in that race. I want the car. I want the car that reminds me and rams it home.
I think it's going to be a thing. John Smiles has obviously recently done this book, and obviously it'll be on sale this weekend. Allan will be signing the book, so it's a great thing for you to purchase it, actually get an autograph from the man, because as many of us will agree watching and also hear that a lot of these guys are at an age where we're not all living till we're in the cocoon movie. So it's really vital that we get out and celebrate these guys. And the Australian Muscle Car Masters is really the event that does celebrate the history of motorsport. Other events try and do it, but this event and the magazine is forecast into the history that we all grew up with and 2 generations above us and below us also get into.
And you make a good point, because it can't last forever. With a lot of the legends are now in their late 70s or early 80s. So it's really now or never.
Just to go back to the stream and some of the conversation, we've had a memory shared, which I think is a pretty good one. It's been shared on the Blendline page. So, Barry, you need to get over to the Sydney Motorsport Park page and share it there if you want to win these tickets. But he says his best memory was for bringing a few lads over from New Zealand in 2013, being a DJR and a Ford fan, to be able to watch Bill Pye's Mustang go around. And on the Saturday, they shared a few beers at the top with Dino Johnson, which was a great day and a great day of racing. So
that, and leading into that, as you said about the Kiwis coming over, I was here in 2010, and 2000 and even earlier than that, having a bit of obviously New Zealand background. I remember talking to the guys at Central Muscle Cars, as it was, that had come over and watched the Masters for the first time. They came and sat in the grandstand. We had discussions then about how can we get you guys, and how can we get our cars to be here. I think it was 3 years later that happened. And that particular weekend was probably one of the busiest, because those guys run what they run. They're an incredible cross-section of horsepower and styling and stuff you wouldn't normally get away with when it comes to the cams scenario. They come over, they put on a great show, and I know in the future for the event, that's something that definitely we want to look at again, because they have gone on to leaps and bounds.
Yeah. Kim Davidson's also written in that Colin Bond was her high school driving instructor.
Well, Kim, you need to come back this weekend. I think we can organise to get a car. We can get a learner's plate on the front and back. Could be a number 2 Falcon. Could be, and these are the things that I'd love to set up, and we can set that up. That can be done. You know, to get her back. Yeah, so perhaps.
If Kim gets herself in the gate and gets herself known to Todd, it might work out.
And it's 1,000 of those little Kodak moments that you don't get in modern motorsport, that you get at the Muscle Car Masters, and we say, bring it on.
Yeah, no, I'd love that. That'd be great.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah,
so that's some really cool stuff and history with that. Going on the New Zealand categories and them coming over, I had a question pitched to me during the week to ask to you guys, which I thought was a really interesting question. The idea of, we have all these historic categories, but we don't have categories so much that people can race like they're legends if they can't afford, you know, the Mustang like you see on the cover, or a Tirana or things like that with heritage touring car things. So the idea of building a tribute Group C and A category, but with, you know, newer roll cages and proper stuff, but being able to run the big flares and tribute liveries, and maybe you only allow in each category 117 green stuff and one, you know, 25 Marlboro style car. Would that be something that you guys would think would be a cool thing to do, or would it cause too much disruption?
Yeah, look, it'd be great in theory, but the issues are particularly in the current issue, and this is a CAMS thing / historic racing, Alan Hamilton, but anything with cigarettes and alcohol, unfortunately, unless it's the real deal, and the process to get a current certificate of description is very, very hard.
Yeah.
The replica thing for me has always been interesting. I'm all for it, but you've got to do it right.
Yeah.
You have got to do it right. And this gets back to the font, it gets back to the colours, it gets back to ensuring that whatever you're replicating is done correctly.
Yeah.
You can't have, for example, I don't know how many 28C XU1s I've got on my books, about 23 of them nationally. There are about 14 05 Brock hatchbacks.
Yep.
There are a number of Green's Tough Falcons, Dick Johnson Falcons. There are a number of them. You know, out of that group, there's only probably 2 or 3 that are correct.
Yep.
And it's not so much an issue, but it's something that certainly, when you're going to replicate a car, you do it because you have a fascination about the car and or the driver. So to pay justice, you've got to do it right.
Well, I think the thing is as well, you should do it, giving it justice to what you're doing, but also to have that idea of like, the people who did these stickering schemes and paint schemes and things are still about, you know, and you can get hold of them, but they sort of faded into the abyss because they weren't seen as, or they didn't feel like they were valuable to the community. So we've got to work on bringing that value back so that people feel like they have something to offer, because they love doing this, and we all get a kick out of seeing these cars, but you don't really attribute that somebody actually did the work to make that happen. So I guess maybe if there's a way you could build that into it to make sure they're Correct.
And the next thing you've got to think of is that CAM's role, the Confederation of Australian Motorsport, is to ensure that all existing categories and their competitor base and their clubs are healthy and financial. So to bring on a replica class, it can't detract from another existing class, then take money away, take competitors away. So I'm thinking probably Touring Car Masters. So that is essentially a replica class. You've got now the SLR 5000s, and you've got, I understand that Stephen Johnson next year is keen to run, with the help of his old man, a true Blue Falcon in Touring Car Masters. Now, they need to get that rubber stamped from the other competitors in Touring Car Masters. They need... Touring Car Masters needs to have their plans rubber stamped by CAMS. So to have a replica class in there, would it detract from Touring Car Masters? In some ways it probably would. So you can't have too many classes, but it's fine in the right classes. There's an embryo of a good idea there. But all forms of motorsport are super expensive these days, and then it's regulations. How do you ensure it not becoming a horsepower war and a spendathon and that sort of thing? But that's not a bad idea. It's worth consideration.
It comes back to the thing of you can't. Sorry to interrupt you, Todd. I know you've got an idea percolating there.
Oh, it's already. I have a plan for exactly what you've said for next year.
I guess the thing is, because just talking about that history and saying, there's not much more time to see some of these drivers, and the cars are getting so expensive that it's hard enough to get them to an event like this to be on display, let alone put it on a track with other vehicles, and to keep that younger audience understanding what's going on. I guess in some regards, V8s have tried the retro round. NASCAR does retro liveries. Maybe this could be a full retro idea.
In my mental notebook up here, there is a plan for me next year to 2018 edition to have a car on site that starts on Saturday morning as a clean skin. And comes Sunday afternoon as fully sign written and vinyl printed, a la like one of the race cars that floats around. Still deciding what it'll be, and you're right, it's the cost of actually getting the car. But strangely enough, I've got what's known as the poor man's Bowden collection. So I've almost sort of headhunted one of my own cars to bring along and get a sign writer, get it sign written. Some of it was vinyl, but a lot of it, depending on the period of the car, was obviously vinyled up. So that has been thought about in my mind. I've just got to figure out, is it an XR GT where you can't because it's too early, there's not much signage on them? Or is it a LJ or an LC Tirana in a particular livery that hasn't been seen before from one of the older cars?
Which is still, fairly low on the livery amount, so I guess it's doable in a weekend.
It depends. There's one particular car that people look at. It's probably one of the ugliest Tiranas, I might say, that was ever livered back in the day, but in true life and in colour, it would be outstanding. So those are things that certainly trying to build up. There's a lot of ideas and plans for this event, for this year's edition. Oddball and rarities, cars. The other one that springs to mind is we've got the New South Wales Highway Patrol, a collective of guys that collect old police cars. It's a great thing. I think it's such a fabulous thing. And their cars, I thought we were a bit white-lined on correction, but these guys, Kevin Wells and his guys, are just super absorbed in making sure. For me, it's the right font if you're replicating, in New South Wales anyway, the black on mustard or ochre number plates that were period for the time. Replicating those, having the right fonts on things. There's so many variations on cars. Correct side registration label. It's a full-time gig for a guy in Victoria, having the right label on your car. So when you arrive to an event, the back window dealer decal's correct. The side window court event is correct with the Commissioner of Police with the right scribble. Those are the things, when you come to certain displays, whether it's the Masters or an old Holden Day at Windsor or wherever we are, to ensure are correct. And look, some people say it's restoring is boring. Restoring is very hard if you're going to go correct, because you've got to have the right zinc, CAD plate, the right colours, the right, everything's got to be right, because there are people we call rivet counters that can spot it. And that'll even go for this Tirana Transporter, the Ron Hodgson cars that we're going to have on display. back in the day, they actually weren't all the same. They were a bit different. There's a four-door. I spoke to Ron Misson about this, who was heavily involved with Ron Hodgson and Bob Morris as the chief spanner man, and he remembers correctly that they docked it up a four-door to be a two-door on the transporter. Tape over the rear door jamb, over the handle. They actually took out the rear quarter vent, quarter glass divider. So we're doing the same thing. We're not taking out the quarter vent divider, but we're red taping that over a bobtail. So I haven't told the auntie yet, but it's, we've got people coming from the south coast, Wollongong area, with that four-door. Yeah. And we are replicating. Some of the cars are having full signage, some are only having half signage, but it's people will pick it. Yeah. Back in the day, it was pretty hard to pick. Yeah. It's going to be a great thing.
And that's the sort of thing that people can really enjoy in some regards, bringing in that history aspect of off-track, not just on-track, so that you can experience it.
Well, next year, red double-decker bus, Tirana, great way to move. Peter Jansen. There's that sort of stuff in vogue. And for people that are aware of that, 1975... Allan Moffat did the same thing with some Red Falcons. There were 5 Red Falcons put on a transporter. So if you've got a Red Falcon, just get in touch with Ben Line in the event, and
Yeah, let Australian Muscle Car Masters know.
Yeah. There's so many great facets off track, and that's the thing for the event, the racing. And I must say, the Muscle Car Masters was never meant to be a race meeting. It was a showcase of the golden era, and the golden era in Australian motoring. Really, it's 2 or 3 decades, but it's extending. So it's really vital that, as we've said earlier, come on out. If you see these guys, and there are a whole collective of legends coming to the event. It's going to be a really great time.
I guess to show how that golden era is moving forward, now we have the Kuhmo V8s here as well, which is some of the very cool earlier V8 supercars. Kind of misses the 5-litre touring car group, which is a bit unfortunate, but still... some cool cars will be in the
a couple of representatives of the 5-litre touring car organisation coming this weekend. They're going to have a run in what we call the Master Blast, which is demonstration sessions. And in the Kuhmo series, the Kuhmo touring car series, there's the guys at the front who are super serious. They've got their cars decked out with their own sponsors, but there's actually a division of that class which has got 2 or 3 retro cars in there too. So Jamie McDonald has Bob Pearson's product Commodore, the black car. Remember the colours of the rainbow all on the side? Yeah. Looks fantastic. And also I saw today on the V8 Sleuths website that there's an ex-Dick Johnson Racing Jim Beam Falcon still in its Jim Beam livery that's going to race in that class too. And that's something that's going to grow over time.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be... It creates that history aspect to bring the cars out to and have a run in front of a crowd that really appreciates them, because we've kind of lost that in the new era of motorsport, that really appreciating the cars and drivers when they were teams that ran it themselves. I guess, Todd, what else can we expect? We're going to go through the list of what we can expect here. But
I mean, we've certainly, tribute to Bo Seaton's a big thing on Sunday. Yep. We're going to have a collective of him, and it'll be very orchestrated to actually have 3 Group C Capris here on site. We're pretty lucky. Carl Mueller is running his Group C Capri in the Heritage Touring Car category. We've also got, this is a great colour, beautiful bright green Seaton Smith car Capri that Greg Omerod in Sydney he owns. Plus, of course, the Seaton family still has the Seaton 55 Capri that they ran in 1983, and that was obviously Glenn's first drive. So to have a whole gaggle of Capri road cars, GT500 road cars, Group N Capris.
Have you called the display area the Isle of Capri?
Well, there's an idea. We just need to get some water to surround it. Not be a bad thing, though. I don't mind. It's a Gold Coast thing. Isle of Capri's nice. But funnily enough, that display, from a bird's eye view, if people are certainly at the event standing up on top of the pit garages, if you look down, that display will spell out the letters B-O, Bow, and that's how I've designed it. So they're all different displays. The Holden dealer team, Repco display is going to be things. We've also got the Wall family. Now, of course, the late Des Wall, David Wall, and David Fife, obviously the man behind everything. They're going to bring their beautiful Pace transporter, of course, Pace sponsoring the Group N, the New South Wales Historic guys. They're going to have a couple of special cars. I think the Monaro is certainly here, the Bob J. Monaro. the Gigan, or I call the Gagan Mustang. Plus, I believe they're also bringing the sports sedan. So, Holden Dealer Team sports sedan, Tirana. So there's going to be a collective. I've also got some John Leffler Mini. I've got a Rocky Canto sports sedan Mini. He's a loose cannon Rocky. Thank heavens for his son is on the straight and narrow. But there's just a great collection, and that's just in this pit area. Yeah. There's a whole people will walk around, and the Master Blast cars. Luke touched on it briefly. We've got a guy, Shembry. Now, Neil Shembry's name should be known to many, and Gary Courtley. Neil and Gary drove through Bathurst through the late 90s, early 2000s. Neil has his own private collection. He's bringing the ex-Warlock Komatsu Falcon. Plus he's got the Product car, was another car as well that they've got coming. Falcon and a Commodore. Neil's also been very gracious. He's bringing two cars that he's recently purchased from the John Harris collection in Brisbane. So the Ray Winter car, the Everlast Falcon. He's also got the brown John French, beautiful car, blue Falcon Coupe. They're both coming. So we're very, very thankful for Neil Shembry to bring those, I call heavy hitters, those Falcon Coupes with big wheels. Love them. And
actually, we've got quite a few Falcon Coupes. I mean, we touched on the Bond car, but also racing in heritage touring cars. We have Ed Singleton's ex-John Goss. I think it's in the livery of 77 and 78. So that will actually be racing. So there's about half a dozen Falcon Coupes that will be racing out here, and they're massively popular, understandably so.
Falcon Coupes. We've got people coming from Brisbane in their Falcon Cobra. So we've got a collection of Cobra road cars as well, and they'll form part of the display, a V-shaped display, and at the bottom of the V will be the number 2 Bond car. I'm really very happy and proud that people are travelling a fair distance, upwards of 2,000 kilometres to bring here. We've got a guy from Adelaide called Michael Myers that's bringing a Dea Sportive. Nice. Now, two-door V8 Commodore. It was a dealer constructed vehicle as such. Only made 11. And Michael's bringing that to us. So that's in that oddballs, rarities pile. And that's the stuff that when you walk past, you take a double glance because you're used to seeing a Commodore, but this is black with the SS gold stripe and livery, and I think a Simmons gold wheel. It's a good-looking thing, and it's just part of what people will see here over the 2 days.
Not the same Austin Powers, Mike Myers?
No, different spelling. Although if he had the promotional girls, perhaps Michael could do well. But, look... There's some great cars coming, and I think that's really important on the displays. And I might say that the pit displays are Saturday and Sunday. It's not just a Sunday. They're arriving Friday afternoon. They'll all be set up in their individual elements, which people can actually go online and look at. But then you've got a massive collective of club cars. We've got over 400 club cars coming that are going to be around the grandstand on the outside of the track. The Leyland P76 guys are going to be here. You've got the Hunter Valley Tirana Club, you've got the Sydney Tirana Club, you've got Falcons from the Central Coast, you've got a collection of minis, you've got a whole gamut of stuff that I think is important because it brings people together. And I might say it's not clubs, because this year as well, a lot of individuals have just sent in a form and we're happy to accept it. Provide you with a ticket, come on in for the day, particularly on the Sunday. Just enjoy, come on over into the pit area, buy some stuff. Auto Picks, David Blanche is always on site, got some great photos, sheriffs. So there's a whole collective of merch, as we call it, merchandise and memorabilia. And there's some great event merchandise as well. Yes. That'll be...
some of which we have behind us right here
well,
on the street.
That's not a bad thing.
You can see what that shirt looks like. It's a great thing to buy, and they've put a lot of effort into those. There's caps and everything as well. Just lean back so people can see. It's got all the tributes that we will be running across the weekend, and some of the extra ones as well, so that we can see. I mean, that Tirana race is going to be one to watch on Sunday afternoon.
And all Tirana race, and that's going to feature, I think, 18 to 19, 20 cars, LCLJs. And Paul Tierney is one of the guys running in that category. He's really looking forward to it. And they, as a group, those Tirana guys within the category, they're looking forward to it. I think a lot of them are looking forward to it because we're tossing up. I think Don Holland will actually present the awards, and Don, has his own history in motorsport and his sons. So they're really looking forward to that all-terrain race that happens on Sunday. And again, people can check schedules to find out exactly when it is.
I'll tell you what, if you want to watch that all-terrain race from somewhere pretty spectacular, I recommend going down to Turn 1 on the exit of the hill there, because they come through with that much power oversteer on that. They're holding on for the ride and keeping the boot into it. So that's going to be something to see. Incredible stuff. Let's get back a little bit, Luke, and talk a little bit about the magazine and your involvement with it. I guess it's something that people don't really understand. I mean, all three of us here on the desk have a bit of a background in automotive magazines, so we understand a bit of the process that goes involved. But it's not as simple as just sit down and write a story. So can you give a bit of an insight for people at home of what it takes to put something like this together? That was a loaded question and a long answer, but I think it was.
I'll tell you how long it takes, because he seems to go grey every month and comes back looking great.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, thank you.
Deadline
thank you very
time.
much. It's a challenge. I mean, it's a great job. Look, I get to work within my passion, my area of passion every day. However, we're up to issue 98 now. And any time we put something in the magazine that touches on what we've done in the past, you soon hear about it. So the great thing about Australian Muscle Car magazine is that the guys who are buying it, who are buying it now, and it is 95% males that are buying it, and I'd say that the average age would be about 60.
Yep.
They're the chaps that were buying it when it started 16 years ago. So they want new stories, and they won't tolerate any repetitive stuff, and understandably so. So when you get up to issue 98 and 99, it is difficult to find new cover cars and new stories and new angles to come up with. But we seem to battle on and come up with stuff that people like, because we are a magazine that's still holding its own in terms of sales. There's been a lot of magazines that have fallen by the wayside over the last few years, given the shows like this, basically, and other forms of media. Yeah, thank you very much.
Well, you've got an advantage over us, and you can get hold of these cars, so you're still winning in that.
Yeah. So everything starts with the photos. If you can't photograph it, or you don't have the historical images, then you can't do a story on it. There's a lot of stories that fall by the wayside because we can't illustrate it, and we can't verify the information. So, but my passion is, I'm less technically minded. So Mark Osler, when he looked after the first 53 issues, the magazine in his day was much more technically orientated. So he'd tell the definitive story, the nuts and bolts story on the A9Xs. So. And he would do, say, the 30th anniversary story on A9X and just break down the mechanics of it, speak to the guys who are still around, that were still alive, the engineers who built it. It's a challenge to find those guys today and find new people to chat to, but we can find other angles to talk about A9Xs and find new stuff. And new angles, and I love the personalities in the sport, so I've probably taken the magazine a little bit towards the stuff that I like and I can achieve, which is a little bit more of the characters and the colour of the sport. So there's ways and means of doing it, and we've got some really cool things coming up in the future too.
I guess how do you find the cars that people? That's probably a big question for people. I mean, I know that really, people writing in or calling up and telling you about cars is always appreciated, even if it doesn't necessarily sometimes make its way into the magazine. It's great for your knowledge bank to know where cars are. So that sort of interactivity is really important, I'm sure.
It is, and the tricky thing is to find authentic cars, because a lot of people are offering their cars, and unfortunately we can't cover those vehicles because we can't authenticate them. And we only run the vehicles in the magazine that have received the rubber stamp from the people who are really in the know. So I rely on, I've got Tirana guys, I've got Commodore guys, I've got Falcon GT guys, I've got FPV guys.
Super Chicken guys.
I have those too. When are you going to get that thing sorted, mate?
There's a question. The Holden Super
Then
Chicken.
you have the guys who say, hey, I've got a car for you. Yeah, it's probably another year away. That year ticks by, get another Christmas card from a T. Martin from Townsville. How's that car going? Oh, it's not ready yet to put in the magazine. But there's always new cars that are being restored, and when they're beautifully restored, yeah, that's it. And and the funny thing is, where do you find cars? Regional Australia. If I could go on the Women's Weekly World Discovery Tour of the world and Western Australia, regional Western Australia and North Queensland, it'd be amazing what you would find out there and what cars are still tucked away.
Love to be a shed inspector. We actually did a pilot for a famous Foxtel communications company, a shed somewhere, and didn't get off the ground about 5 years ago. But it's still in the moment to actually a poor trade just happened to hear about it. It's a bit like another American show where they happen to fall upon antiques or expensive things, and we were going down that same road of a shed somewhere, turn up obviously pre-planned and find these cars. But regional Australia, you're right, it's small towns. I can give you a hint. Ipswich, west of Brisbane, is a hotbed for XU1s and GDR Tiranas. Extraordinary where they are. But then you can go into the Riverland of South Australia and find an extraordinary amount of Valiant Paces. Who would have thought? They are everywhere, aren't they? They seem to, it's almost like the guy in the States with all the Cadillacs that are pushed into the ground. They grow out of the earth.
And South Australians have such an affiliation with the Chrysler brand because that's where Tonsley Park, the Chrysler factory was, where they built the Valiants and the Chargers. So you're 100% right. There's some just gems out there. And the other thing is that we're getting quite a few auctions of deceased estates. So there's some chaps out there who've now passed on, and there's going to be more of them pass on. I'm being a bit morbid with some of my subject matter tonight, aren't I? But there's families auctioning sheds that their father or uncle said, no, you're never selling them while I'm alive. Who knows what treasures are going to be found in the next 2 years with the guys who are collecting cars from the early 70s when they pass on and those sheds get opened up.
I think the thing that's interesting about all those sheds as well, sorry to interrupt you again, Todd, but like the thing that I've noticed a lot of, and I have a family who collects cars and things like that, is that you have a real history amongst those people, that they not only collected the car, but they've got this whole parts and memorabilia storage with the car as well, that when those come up, you'll get enough to be able to fully restore the car in a lot of cases, because they've snapped up rear windows that were hard to find or doors that were hard to find. And it's sort of the culture that we don't really have in the younger generation of making sure those things are there. So we can still get some of these authentic cars as authentic. This is periodly correct.
Yeah, you're 100% correct. I mean, look, it's due to the muscle car phenomenon is not anything that sprung up overnight. There was a collaboration of things, and I put that back to this publication, Muscle Car Magazine. I put it back to people like the Bowdens with their motor cars on the Sunshine Coast. I put it back to a chap in WA who has his own collection. Places like events as well were a great indicator for it. Specialist events. Victorian Historic Racing Register runs the Phillip Island Historics. Older demographic again, but still has that tin top mentality coming through. So there's been a collective, and then of course, as you know, with most things, the prices of these motor cars start to escalate, which beyond belief for some of the prices of some of the cars. It mellowed out for a while, and now in recent months, 6 to 8 months, it's gone up again, and that partly has a lot to do with property prices in the mining sector and mining boom, even though it's not at a whole. So the car fraternity and the muscle car movement, it's not an old thing. I look at it and mirror it to what America was like 30 to 40 years ago, and we are doing the same.
Leanne Boardman's written in that she said it was a great day out and she loves seeing the old cars go fast. So that really just brings back that message of you can come and watch some rolling history. And these guys, they put the cars on the line. It's not necessarily just taking it easy. I mean, some of the Group N guys I know are flat out in those cars. And we saw at Sydney Classic earlier this year, some of the Group A and C guys as well were probably racing a bit harder than your purists would like to see trackside. Todd, can you give us a bit of a history, just diverting now off the subject, a bit of a history for yourself in motorsport, and we never really touched on that question of what got you involved and where you've been over the years involvement.
Yeah, I mean, I was obviously born and bred in what I might say all the bad parts of Auckland. I guess people have seen once were Warriors. That's me. South Auckland. But I was lucky as a kid growing up, Pukekohe, obviously a track that many people would realise just south of Auckland. Mum going out with Jim Richards, not that never actually happened. Going to Pukekohe, I'd go to Sunday school on a Sunday morning and then go to Pukekohe. We then moved down to a place called Taronga, or the Tauranga, in the Mount Maunganui area, which was home to Bay Park, which is another great racetrack in New Zealand that's now gone, like so many great tracks. You would go to motor racing over there and you would see all these guys drivers. And as a kid, it was an extraordinary thing to see those cars back in the day. And so my favourite car was a Vauxhall Victor, which is an English variation of a Vauxhall, but it was, I think, an alloy V8. It was sponsored by a shampoo company called Cossack Warrior, and it was a reddy orange car, white Cossack Warrior, and a guy called Jack Naser drove that car, and it's recently, I just missed out on buying it. It's recently been found, and the Stone brothers actually engineered the car. So as a kid, those cars growing up, Reg, he had a Cherry car, a sponsored little Datsun Sunny. Who would have thought? So there were guys like that. I grew up. I moved here in the late 70s, straight to Lakeside. And motor cars, and there are strange things that I remember sitting on the side of the Pacific Highway in 1979, early 6 o'clock one morning in Springwood, to watch a Marlborough Holden dealer team Commodore drive past, and another one at the Repco reliability trial in 1979. So the motorsport thing for me is, I won't say a bug, but has been into it. My first car was an LJ XU1 when they were cheap. Over the years I was lucky to, I guess if you have a passion for something, you want to get involved in it. And I started doing events. 2002 did a major, I won't say a major thing, but 2001 and in 1997 I'd met a guy called Glenn Amos. Now many people would know Glenn owns the real 28C that Peter Brock drove at Bathurst in 1972. I had met Glenn. We'd had a few conversations, and I said I want to get a collection of Bathurst or Tiranas, XU1s, go to Bathurst in 2002, and here we are 2015. Be a great thing. We'll get a collective. We'll get 30 or 40 that'll go to Mount Panorama. A guy called Tim Pemberton, called Plastic. He was the link with Holden Motorsport. I rang him and said, I want to do this. He said, good luck, son. From a manufacturer's point of view, it'll cost you a bazillion, because back then Supercars was managed by a different company. But we had 117 XU1s turn up in 2002. And when Mark Osler was with the magazine, they covered it. And Holden themselves were gobsmacked that I was able to get all those cars on track on Sunday morning, led by Peter in the 28C car, with the flag out the window. So it was a milestone for me. I then, strangely enough, got contracted by Holden to do their heritage displays at motor shows, and that led on to more and more things. The Masters, Classic Adelaide, managing Classic Adelaide, which again, Adelaide and South Australians, they are very lucky because of that foregone thing of Tonsley Park with Valiant and Chrysler, but also Holden, Elizabeth. And I find, and whether it's Pagewood in Sydney here as it was, and Acacia Ridge in Brisbane and Fisherman's Bend, that, when you look at those, and I'm digressing here, and I might say Italians and Greeks and all those guys have been cast over the years for into these cars. It's a simple fact that their parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles were those that worked in those production factories, and they were those that made the bits and pieces or the parts that contracted to those manufacturers, that they were brought up around it. So I've always said, I'm going to say, I want the Greeks and the Welks and the Italians, they were ahead of their time. Those guys and girls, they knew cool before we knew it. They were across it. So the motor car thing, the history, and over the years I've collected, as I said, the poor man's Bowden collection. and I've only got one real race car.
Still, it's probably better than a lot of poor men. But just going back to the stream, we've got Taz Lensbury saying they're bringing their XB down for the day. Doug Matthews will be here with his Cortina GT500.
In the Bo Seaton parade, Dougie. Well done.
Yep. Warren Gagan's written that his favourite memory of Muscle Car Masters is being there with Leo Gagan. So that's probably understandable.
Warren, and I have had a discussion, and Warren obviously is related to the great Leo Gagan, and he will be involved with a couple of guys called the Gurneys, father and son Rod and Corey Gurney have got a fantastic replica of the 68 XT that Leo drove. Now they're coming from the Blue Mountains area. They're bringing that car. Warren's going to be involved in that. And another replica, a guy called Ron Horner, who drove through the day in an RX-7. They're replicating an RX-7, but they've also got the real one that they're restoring as well. So it's great that people are able to get online and communicate that to us.
Says their favourite memory of Muscle Car Masters was meeting Fred Gibson. So I think there's a real theme there of meeting people and being able to talk to them. From some of the comments we've had tonight is really shows this community aspect as well, which I think we're doing a lot of work to bring back to Muscle Car Masters and make it less about a race meeting and more about an atmosphere. We've actually gone past an hour now, and I know you guys didn't expect to be able to talk so comfortably for an hour. We were pretty confident that you'd be able to get there. I guess leading off, what are you most excited about this year's event and about moving forward?
I'm just really excited about the static displays and just all the really cool things. Because as I said, go to a motor racing event, be it Supercars today or a retro or historic event, and it's not one thing that blows your mind. It's a series of experiences, and it's a series of really cool things. You go, oh wow, I wasn't expecting to see that. I haven't seen that car for a long time. I remember that car. Oh, is that? Oh, it is John Goss, and there's his neckerchief, and all that sort of stuff. It's just a day's worth of sights and sounds, and that's what we're aiming to dish up.
Yeah, for me it'll be standing on the garage, the top of the garages here at Sydney Motorsport Park, and look towards the racetrack and see a grandstand of people, but to also look over into the pit area to see those displays and see the myriad of colours. Because for me, muscle car events, it's the colours and stripes from the golden era, and that's what it's about. For people to be able to come along to see 6 red Tiranas on a transporter that look the same, and the real one is also coming. So Mel Wilson's bringing the real Bob Morris John Leffler XU1 here. Bob Morris, for you to be able to come to the event, stand beside Bob Morris and his car, have a photo with those 6 cars and the statewide car carrying transporter they're going to be on. It's going to be a great thing. And John Goss, there could be a rumour that Gossy might turn up with a prototype of what he would have driven in 1976 at Bathurst. That could be another thing. And Gossy is Gossy.
And it will rock up at the 11th hour, you can guarantee that.
Yeah, see, I won't impersonate John because they say it's flattery in the greatest form, but Ford Motor Company really did need him. So he's a great man.
There's definitely a lot to look forward to. We'll wrap it up because we're reaching the end of our time, really. We've got to get out of here at Sydney Motorsport Park because it's not open too late tonight, but you can be sure it's going to be open late all weekend here at Sydney Motorsport Park for the Australian Muscle Car Masters 2017 edition. Big thanks to both of you guys for joining us on the stream. We've really enjoyed having a chat.
Can I just send a cheerio to the guys from the Bathurst Hilton who are tuning in tonight, and the CEO Dale Sudholtz who's rallied the troops. So always appreciate their support, those guys.
Definitely. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I think, Sod?
No, thanks, mate. Pleasure to be here. Now over to procure, as the words of John Goss would say, some sponsors' product.
That's
Cheers.
it. It's going to be time to do that. Thank you again to all of our sponsors as well, Valvoline Mothers, Mercedes-Benz Parramatta, Apex, Tickford and Famous Insurance, as well as a couple of others who are on board for the weekend, going to be bringing some great stuff. You'll be able to see every moment live here on Blendline TV, the Sydney Motorsport Park page and Australian Muscle Car Masters page, but make sure you're at the venue because you won't get to experience it the same way via the live stream. It's great, it's something I love doing, but being able to actually see these cars, not quite touch them, but see these cars and stand right next to them is going to be a cool thing. Thank you again to Sydney Motorsport Park and the ARDC for allowing us to put on this show. We hope you've enjoyed it. Until next time, I'm Daniel Beckinsale. Bye for now.
Cool. Legend. That's been very quickly.
Sorry for babbling.